Welcome to the Marketing Journal, a collection of hard lessons learned, battles fought, and challenges overcome throughout my years growing my agency. First as a marketing coach and consultant, and now as a seven-figure agency leader. If you find these lessons valuable, make sure to like and subscribe. And now on with the show. For a long time, I have thought about recording some kind of journal, diary, podcast, something that I could use to track my progress in growing my business. And I didn't really have a good reason to do it because spending the time doing this is a bit of an inherently selfish act. It's assuming that some point in the future, this footage will be valuable to me in looking back on how I grew this business. And because of that, I've had a really hard time sitting down and actually spending the time to do this. And a couple weeks ago, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about my dad. And my dad was an entrepreneur too, and he spent a long time planning the business that he would go on to launch. And I don't really have any records from that time. All of his documents got lost or destroyed. He never made any really recordings. It's hard for me to even find any recordings of his voice because he wasn't a particularly big talker and he wasn't a big, show off in the way that you would look for reasons to record his voice. And so because of that, I've always felt that I don't know him as an adult since he passed when I was 10 in the way I knew him as a kid. And that to me is a great loss because there's so many things that I wish I could understand about the way he approached businesses and how he thought about launching his business and what challenges he ran into and all of that. And I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking about my own daughter. And, right now she's not old enough. She's 2. Her name is Molly. And she's not really old enough to understand what daddy does. We taught her that daddy does marketing. So if you ask her, she might, she's not too shy to say it. She might say that daddy does marketing, but beyond that, I don't think she has any real concept of what I do or, what I'm building. She's probably not even old enough to understand the concept of money or any of that, but this is all happening now. And the hope would be is that, 10 years from now, I'm in a very different place with the business. And maybe she will want to go back and see, like, what was my dad doing when he was in his mid-30s and I was a little tiny kid. And, when he would come down from work, because I work from home. And so, when I come down from work and play with her, like, this is the reason why daddy couldn't come down and play. This is why he locked himself in his office all day. Like, that's not as like an excuse for not being there. But I mean, I'd love to spend every minute of time with her. But the gamble I'm making is that I spend the time to build this business now so I can spend the more time with her later. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how, not recording this is just as selfish as recording it because I'm stealing from her an opportunity to hear me in my own words talk about what it's like to grow a business and the challenges and the lessons. And you go through your life and you end up forgetting way more than you remember. And so I thought to give her the best shot in her own life of becoming an entrepreneur and becoming successful, the least I could do would be to record my journey and the lessons I've learned along the way and my thoughts on different situations that arise. And so that's what this podcast is going to be. It's going to be a diary of what I'm going through in the business. And, we'll start out with kind of a recap of what we've gone through so far. So I have at least that captured in one place. And I've been on podcasts and stuff and told parts of the story, but I don't think I've ever actually sat down and told the full story. So we'll start there. And then it'll just be kind of a snapshot of what I do each week. And so my plan is to record this every Wednesday, which currently is my working day. So block it out on the calendar and record it. If you want to follow along, I would love if you shared it and subscribed it and all that kind of fun stuff. But Also, don't, again, selfishly, even if you do that, I'm not expecting you to buy anything from me. I think it would be cool if my daughter saw that a podcast I made for, 1 million viewers or something like that. I think that'd be kind of neat. So that's where I was going to say that's where I'm going to cut off. But maybe what I should do for this is use it to tell the whole story. So I'm going to pause here because I just set all this up on my computer to record all this. And I want to make sure that when I hit the stop button, it doesn't like crash the computer and nothing gets recorded. So let me pause there and then I'll come back and I will tell you the story of Grow House so far. All right, be right back. So I gotta say, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that it actually worked. I just went and looked at the footage and it's actually recording and it looks good and the lighting's not perfect and there's a reflection of my lamp on the logo light and all that stuff, but it's good. It actually looks pretty reasonable. So good. That makes me happy. So let's talk about my story so far. So I grew up about 15 minutes from where I live now, but I didn't always live here. I grew up in Pennsylvania with my mom and my dad. My mom ran an insurance agency. My dad was the vice president at a bank. He was a loan officer. He helped farmers. It was an ag bank. So he helped farmers get loans to buy equipment, to buy land, to buy animals. And he really loved that work because he came from a farm and he knew it really well. And he had really bad allergies, so he couldn't work on a farm. And so this was his way of still being involved in agriculture without having to actually be out in a field all day and have allergy attacks all the time. That was a quote unquote gift that he passed down to me. I have severe allergies. And so when I was growing up on the farm, I could not work in the fields either, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I grew up spending a lot of time with my dad out in the garden because even though he had allergies to like corn and hay and that kind of stuff, he was still able to keep just an incredible garden. He was a master gardener. It's phenomenal artistic, creative instinct when it came to plants and gardening. And he was really, really proud of it. And that natural talent was something he always wanted to leverage in the form of building his own greenhouse. And so I got to watch sitting at his heels on the carpet while was at his desk researching. And we had a computer, but this is before the days of like research on the internet. So he was reading textbooks and magazines and trade journals and planning this all out on loose leaf paper. And I would watch him do this every day. And he would just chip away at this idea. And one day, you'd always say, one day I'm going to open up this greenhouse and it's going to be great. We're going to have this and we're going to have, he's really into like ponds. So we're going to have these water features and we're going to sell. And he had this whole dream of what this business was going to be. And I watched him for the first 10 years of my life inch closer and closer and closer to that dream. And then eventually my uncle decided that they were going to go into business together. My uncle was already running like a wholesale/landscaping operation in New Jersey. And my dad decided we were going to move out there and partner with him to launch his greenhouse. And I remember the car ride when coming back from New Jersey when he first told my mom, and they thought I was asleep in the back of the car, but I heard the whole conversation and it just gutted me because I really liked where we lived and I really didn't want to move. And I liked our house and I liked the tree in the front yard I could climb. And that really put a strain on my relationship with my parents because I just felt like, why are you upsetting our whole lives to go do this thing? And the next summer I hung out on the farm. My dad did his best to show hey, this is going to be fun. Like, this is going to be great. You're going to really enjoy it. But I was too young to really get it. And so it was weird and it was a transition point. And of course, as all this is happening, he's getting ready to launch. And so he launches and it's this big event. And I just remember thinking oh, I get it now. This is why he was working so hard on it. This is awesome. There's all these customers and they all want my dad's attention and they're all excited to buy his stuff. And I was oh, this is what it means to be an entrepreneur. This is what, and I don't think I had the word entrepreneur back then, but I just knew this is what it was. This is what he was chasing. In that moment, it felt like, okay, I get why he upset the apple cart for this. I get why everything had to change because of this. And so it wasn't soon after that he got diagnosed with cancer. And a year later, he was gone.
And really without a strong like male role model, I kind of was directionless for a large portion of my adolescence. I had uncles who tried to get me into farming, but again, I helped them one summer. I ended up in the hospital twice within the same month with massive like allergy attacks where my like airways were closing. And like the second time I was in the emergency room, the same doctor saw me and he's like, "Didn't I tell you to stay out of the fields?" Yeah. And after that summer, I didn't work on the farm anymore. And just wasn't the type of work I was interested in. And I really struggled in school. Came to light that I was dyslexic, and I eventually went to a boarding school for dyslexia. I did better there. I won awards. I did music for a documentary. I got really into music as kind of like a coping mechanism during that time. And I spent a lot of time 4 years ago, from freshman year to senior year, graduated from there, and then went to the Savannah College of Art and Design with an idea that I wanted to work in recording studios. And very quickly after I got there, I fell in with a group of filmmakers, and I kind of like fell in love with film. And I just was like, actually, I don't really love music as much. I think I was just kind of using it as a crutch. Now that I'm on my own, I have the independence I've always wanted. I can do whatever I want. I think I want to do this instead. And so I ended up doing the sound program as well as film classes, and kind of graduated with like a double major. Not really. I think I was a couple credits shy. I was like 1 or 2 classes shy, but I went through both programs. I took a lot of film classes. I did a lot of films, and I was a workaholic even back then. Like I accumulated hundreds of film credits. It got to the point I was working on so many projects at once that they called an assembly for all of the people in the sound program and made an announcement that there were some students that were working on too many projects, and they weren't leaving enough projects for the rest of the students to work on. And like everybody looked at me because everybody knew I had like 10 to 15 projects going on at any given time. And so that started getting me more into producing, because I thought, well, if I can't do sound for these projects, then maybe I can produce them, because that's kind of like a different thing. And so I did that for a while. And that was good because I was working in radio around that time. I'd gotten a job at a radio station, and this is like 2008 or so. And so I'm working at the radio station, and I actually, I should back up. So I met your mother, how I met your mother. It was 2008 Christmas when she first messaged me. We were both students at SCAD, and she lived on the other side of town. And I'd walked by her apartment several times because I used to get my hair cut catty corner, like right next door to where she lived, like right around the corner in the same exact building. And so we met. We had our first date on Valentine's Day, our second date on my birthday, and then I moved in with her. And like the next day, we'd been talking with each other for 6 months. And so we were kind of just like, well, let's just live together. And at the same time, I had gotten this job working at a radio station, and my boss at the radio station was a part-time producer. Well, a part-time manager for an R&B artist. So I shot a music video for her. Music video did really well. She ended up getting signed to a Universal Music Group like a couple years later. And that started me kind of on the road of doing video production. And so after I graduated, we moved to New Jersey, a small town called Bayonne, which is right near Jersey City. It was near enough to New York that I could get there to work, and it was far enough away where the rent wasn't crazy. And so it was still expensive though, and I was like getting nowhere in sound design. I went one day and I was interning at the studio at the time, and I went and asked one of the seniors, one of the guys that gets paid the most. I was like, man, it's like, how much do you make? Like, just be honest with me. Like, what do you take home? He's like, man, I make $25 an hour. And he was proud of it. And this is a guy who's like 40 to 50 years old, like senior, very talented. If I said his name and you looked him up on IMDb, he's probably got 100 to 200 credits easily. Major stuff that you've all would have seen. And it just like crushed me. I was like, dude, what am I doing this for? $25? Like, that's what Costco was paying back then as like a starting salary. I was like, I got to get out of this. And so I started around the same time I started doing consulting, and I did it kind of as like video media consulting. And then that led to some producing gigs, and I did that for a while. And I was really struggling. Like, I just couldn't make anything work. I couldn't figure out clients. And I would see people that were far less talented, didn't have the credits, didn't have the capabilities. Their commercials didn't look as good, and they were all getting work. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? And it occurred to me that it had to be the marketing. It was the one thing I'd never really learned. I'd taken like one class in my master's degree program for business in marketing, and it didn't really click with me. And I just thought, this is what I got to do. I got to focus, and I just got to figure this out. And I spent like weeks sitting in an easy chair like a lazy boy every day for 12 hours a day, researching marketing for months. And like anytime I wasn't doing work, I was researching marketing, and I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And I tried stuff, and some stuff worked and some stuff didn't. And I was getting better and better, but I just felt like I was never going to crack this nut unless I actually worked with experienced marketers. And so I started applying to marketing adjacent roles that had video so that I would still be qualified to do them, but were in a marketing department. And that's when I ended up at St. John's, and I had applied in March, and they got back to me in September, and they didn't hire me until like the end of October. And during that time, we had lost our housing. Our landlord had kicked us out. And during that time, as we were getting kicked out, I'd sent a letter to all of my clients and essentially said, hey, we're losing our housing. I'm not going to be in the New York area anymore. So closing up shop, not going to take any more work. And I thought, like, I was kind of having a little bit of a pity party, and I thought people were going to reach out and be like, oh no, so sorry to hear that. And only one person reached out, and it was one of my mentors, a guy named Kip Kaplan, who's this crazy guy, runs a studio in New York. He still does. And he's crazy in the best sense of the word. Like, he's not a bad dude. He's a personality. And he taught me a lot about what really matters in business. And I'll never forget this because he emailed me and he said, what the F are you doing? Don't ever write me an email like that again. You're admitting defeat before the battle's even started. And I just remember thinking, like, holy shit, why did I send that email? That is so true. Like, I hadn't even gotten started in my business yet. I was in the early stages of making this thing work. Yeah, I had been working at it a long time, so it felt like a gut punch to like lose access to the city. But it's like, this was early on. Like, I didn't need to do that. And I could have made it work. I could have driven into the city. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was making it a big deal because I was hurt that it was just one more loss on the tally of losses that I had been experiencing. It's like 5 years out of school, that's a long time to not make any significant progress in your life and feel like you're still like a barely employed student. And so it sucked. It really, really sucked. It was really hard for Kelly and I, my wife, that was like the final gut punch. And the funny thing was, we got the call as we were with friends heading to a festival. And because I was distracted on the phone going to this festival, I had 3 other people in the car, the landlord's telling me that we lost our housing, and I make an illegal right-hand turn, which is a thing in New York. It's just certain times, and a cop's waiting to catch me. And so on top of everything else that's happening, I also get a ticket. And the landlord tells me we have to leave. So we leave. Kelly kind of moves back. We're on kind of shaky ground because everything is just chaotic. And she comes back for like a weekend trip. And she like flies up, and we're spending some time, and we go to a Devils game. My mom had someone give her like rinkside tickets. And it was awesome. Like right up against the glass. It was fantastic. And so we're driving out, and my phone rings, and it's this number I don't know with this like Italian sounding name. And I pick it up and I go, hello? He goes, hi, my name's Lucy. I work at St. John's. You applied to work with us like back in March, and we're just kind of getting around to it now. Would you be able to come in and do an interview? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, that would be amazing. And she's like, okay, great. I'll send you the details of the position to remind you. So she sends them to me. I go in to do the interview, and then it's like 3 additional interviews, and I'm driving in, and then it's taking so long, and they have graduation coming up, and they're like, hey, I know we haven't like offered you a job yet, but can you come and film graduation? And so I was like, yeah. And I gave them my day rate. And at the time it was like $1,200, and they paid it. I was like, that was the first time I'd asked for that kind of money in a day. And they just like paid it. They didn't even argue. They were like, yeah, sure. And they set me up and introduced me to everybody. And that was kind of, I guess, like a trial. And I shot a bunch of great footage for him, and I gave it to him afterwards. And then they had another interview with like the head of the department. They're like, oh, we really like the footage we saw and all that. And then like nothing. And I don't hear anything. And I'm like emailing Lucy and saying like, are we going to do this? Like, what's the story here? She doesn't tell me anything. She's just like, yeah, they're still debating, and it's a nonprofit, so things go slower. And coincidentally, we're going to another Devils game. My mom had gotten like a couple of tickets that summer, and I was really into hockey. And so Kelly had come back again. And so we're in the car again, going to the Devils game. And Lucy calls me and offers me the job and says, I'm going to send you all the official paperwork. I wanted to call you and congratulate you myself. We're really looking forward to you joining us. And here's the start date. And so then we moved to Long Island. And I was at St. John's for about 3 years. And it was probably the best 3 years of my life in terms of a like corporate office working experience. I loved every single person I worked with the exception of a few people. The head of the department was not a good person, and her second in command, I did not particularly care for. But everyone else in the department was really, really solid. One of my good friends, Rob, I met there. Lucy Gerasi and Giscard James were probably the 2 best bosses I could ever have, especially because I was kind of this wild animal that they had brought in from the outside. And Giscard was kind of my handler because I just wasn't really I wasn't an indoor cat. So he was like in charge of making sure I didn't cause a scene. And I caused some scenes, but it was great. They were great to work with, and it killed me to have to come to them and tell them I was resigning because I had gotten an offer for about 50% more salary from an agency. And that was another kind of dip in the road because I took that agency job and it was terrible. It was working for a massive agency, probably the biggest agency in the world in their pharmaceutical division. I was working for one of the worst human beings I've ever worked for in my life, and a creative director who was nothing to write home about, and a creative team that was all terrified of the leadership team. So like it was just chaos from day one. And they had brought me in to be a producer, but gave me no authority to do anything. Like there was days where I couldn't do anything because they would not allow me to do anything. And then I would go in for performance reviews and they would be like, well, we're really not happy that you haven't done anything. And I was like, well, I'm ready to do stuff. Like you got to go hands off with some of this so I can actually do it. And one of the funny stories there is if you look up in the history of the Super Bowl, there was a thing called the Pharma Bowl where all the pharmaceutical companies, for whatever reason, they all bought Super Bowl ads. And it was like the worst Super Bowl ads of all time. And my boss, this very terrible person, had been working her butt off on this ad. And ad week, the day after, she was all excited going to the Super Bowl. Like she was like, wait, look for the commercial. And she's like all excited. And then she comes in afterwards and she storms into her office. And then my office is next door, and I proceed to hear her scream at people for the next 8 hours straight. And it's alternating screaming and apologizing because she's calling all of the creatives and screaming at them because Adweek had published an article that said the worst Super Bowl ads of all time and used our ad as the picture for the worst one. And so she was like, it was this really bizarre, she would go from screaming to crying to apologizing to screaming to crying to apologizing as she was going through her day. And I just kind of knew that was only like a month into my engagement. And I was like, I don't think this is going to last. Like this place is crazy. And it didn't. I was there about 6 months. I left in like June. And I was like, I'm going to give this consulting thing a stab. I'm going to try to kind of get out there. And so one of the first like real marketing campaigns I put into place was I figured out how to automate LinkedIn messaging, and I sent out a message to a bunch of people on LinkedIn with like a very basic offer of like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. Is there any projects I could help with? And it like crushed it. I did unbelievably well. And I booked dozens, I'll say, of interviews with all different kinds of recruiters and other consultants and just you name it, like different marketing teams. And a lot of them were not great fits. Some of them just wanted to kind of meet me because they were interested in how I was reaching out to them, because LinkedIn automation was not big back then. It was a pretty like revolutionary thing at the time. Very few people were actually doing it. So I'm going in and doing all these interviews, and I'm feeling like for the first time, like, hey, I'm making some serious progress, and hook up with a mentor who was from the agency world and was going to help me like launch my own consulting agency. And so I'm going through all this and I'm getting work here and there, but it's not like super consistent. And then I get called from a consultant, I think, and he said, hey, I am working this job with this publisher, and my time's kind of coming to the end. And I think he was taking like CEO role at another company. And he's like, I don't have time to do this and be CEO over here. So I'm looking for someone to replace me and help fix this company's problems. And they had a lot of problems. And so he's like, I'm going to introduce you to the HR rep or the recruiter or something. And then I'm going to introduce you to the two guys in charge. And so I go through the recruiter to get all my information put together. And then I book a meeting in person with the consultant, and I sit down, and he's like, all right, before you meet with the guys, here's everything you need to know. And essentially it was a media company who was doing sponsored content, and the entire business was in shambles because they could not fulfill on the content they were selling. And so they had about $1 to $2 million line of business that was just about to probably 3 to 6 months from complete failure, because people were starting to go and ask for their money back because they would pay for stuff and it just was never getting done. And I don't really remember how they got into that point in the first place. It was something about like, well, we had somebody and then we didn't, how it goes. So it was something like that. But I met with the consultant. He gave me the lay of the land. I was like, yeah, this is easy. This isn't a problem. And then I met with the two guys, and they were two of the other great bosses that I had, because both of them, like one was kind of like hard charging and the other one was very like laid back and cool. And neither of them worked at the office I was at. So that was kind of unique. And it went through a bunch of negotiations, and they wanted to pay me like less than I was making at St. John's. And I was like, no. If you're going to pay me, you're going to pay me this. And that was my first like six figure payday, was landing that gig. And I started, and for the first 3 months, no one gave me any work. Like I sat at a desk and I panicked every day because I was like, someone is going to realize I'm here and not working and they're going to fire me. But like I would email people and people wouldn't get back to me. And I was like, well, this is the reason like why nothing's getting done, because I'm not getting any answers. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. And then like, I think on like day 61 or something, they finally reached out. They're like, oh, we're sorry, we're busy with the beginning of the year and so on and so forth. And so then they started like loading my plate. And then this girl that was supposed to like train me did one training session with me, and then they fired her. And I was like, she didn't tell me like anything. Like I sat with her for like 15 minutes, and they're like, well, you just got to figure it out. And so that's what I did. I spent from like 2016 to the end of 2020. So like 4 years there. And the first thing I did was I fixed their fulfillment operation, and I got them to a place where they were actually able to fulfill. And that took me like 3 months. And then I said, well, next we need to really optimize the marketing. And so we did that, and we put them on Facebook. Like we started sending them tons of traffic. And like, I remember the head of the magazine, I don't know if she's still there or not, but she was a chore of a human being. And she was convinced that our customers weren't on Facebook. Just convinced, just could not be swayed that our customers weren't on Facebook. And this is a high finance boomer kind of magazine. And for the most part, And so we started running ads, and like she's getting tons of traffic and tons of readership, and like the subscription list is growing and like all this good stuff's happening. And then one day our account gets disabled, like one of those freak things, and all of a sudden all the traffic dries up. And there wasn't a lot of like, it was all automated. It was a system. It's part of the marketing that I'd set up. It was all automated. So no one really noticed because no one really was watching it. It was just pulling from an RSS feed of new articles that were published in the magazine and then promoting them. So it was really a seamless thing. And I didn't really notice. And it had gone down for like 2 months straight. And so what had happened is we have this traffic dip, and we're going into an all hands meeting with the president of the company, and it's me and my boss and like all the heads of the department, and we're all like expected to give like little brief snapshots of like what we're working on. And the thing is, and they get to the traffic, and the president goes, "Why is traffic down 2 months in a row?" And the editor said something like, "Well, which is really seasonal, and I'm sure it'll pick back up. It's whatever." And he's like, no, like there's been a huge drop. Like it's like 10,000 visitors less per month. But why is that? And I go, I know why it's that way. It's because we haven't been running ads. And that, I think, permanently put me on her hit list, because she was really embarrassed because she had publicly come out against this project and didn't know we were running the ads. And when she realized the only reason she was getting so many views was because we were running the ads, it really did not make her too happy. And so after I'd fixed their pipeline and fulfillment issues, and I fixed their marketing issues, and I got them more traffic, and I helped them build up a better pipeline, the last piece of the puzzle was their data and analytics, because at the time we were running these like Excel reports to clients, and clients constantly wanted new reports, especially when they would run like ongoing campaigns. And so I built this reporting platform in Domo, and it was awesome. It was like I put hundreds of hours into this thing. It was awesome. It would combine data from multiple data sources, and like created these beautiful dashboards that we gave dashboards out to every client. It was awesome. It was a great way to display this. And I miss working with Domo because they're such a cool company and it's such a cool product, but we're just not at a place where we can afford the kind of, that's a very luxury level type software. It's very enterprise, as they say. So I did that. And then at that time, there was a bunch of shifting. My first boss had left after the first like year. The other boss had stuck with me for the next 2 years, but then he had left. And there was a shakeup to now move my role onto the events team. And there had been numerous roles that I had gone out for and promotions that I had gotten shut down for because of this woman that had been placed in charge of me when my other boss left. She's the same one that ran the magazine, and she did not like me. And so anytime I would come up for a promotion or I would apply to get transferred to another part, she would deny it. And it just really irked me. Eventually, she put me on the events team, and I helped them fix some of their events during COVID. And during the month of, I think, August of that year, we ran something like 60 events in a single month. It was absolutely ludicrous how many events we ran, but that's all I was doing. That whole month was just running webinars. And then at the end of the year, we parted ways, and I met who would become my 2 business partners. And they had reached out to me and said, "Hey,
You applied for a strategist role with us
a bunch of months ago, and we're just wondering, we're launching a new agency, and we're wondering if you'd like to come run it for us." And I had already been kind of planning to launch an agency after this. And I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. And so I took a meeting with them. But at the same time, I was also interviewing for CMO roles and head of marketing roles and director of marketing roles and vice president of marketing. So I had 3 companies all with offers on the table. And I was sitting at my counter with Kelly one day, and I said, this person's offering me this, but I have to do this. And this person's offering me this, but I have to do this. And this person's offering me this, but I have to do this. I'm not really sure which direction I should go. And at this time, I'd kind of backburnered these 2 guys because, I don't know, it was do I really want partners? I don't know if that's really a good fit for me. They were going to pay me the least out of anybody. And so I was kind of wasn't really seriously considering them. but it wasn't it did pique my curiosity. And I explained them, and I explained all the options and not including them. And Kelly just said, "You don't seem very excited for any of those. Like those are all paying you way more money than you were making, and you just don't seem excited." And I was like, "I'm just not." And she's like, "Well, what would make you excited?" And I said, "Well, there's these two guys that want me to come run their agency, but I'd have to take like a $40,000 pay cut, and there's like no guarantee that I would ever be able to make more than that at that company. And we don't even know if it would succeed, but it's piquing my curiosity, that this opportunity." And she's like, "I think you've already made your decision." It's like, "I think you're right." And so I grabbed the phone. So coincidentally, this is a very weird coincidence. So as we're having this conversation, one of the companies that got the rep text messages me to retract the offer. And he says, "I'm sorry, but we've given you 72 hours. We've decided to retract the offer. Like, no hard feelings. If something changes, feel free to reach out if we haven't filled the role." And so I was like, I kind of took that as my sign, like, all right, I'm on the right track. So I meet with these two guys. And over the past year, I'd actually tried to launch an agency. That's, I think, the real piece of it is like, come January of 2020, so right before COVID hit, that's right around the time this change in leadership, and I'd been placed under this awful woman as my boss, and I knew I didn't want to stay there for any amount of time longer than I had to. And so my thinking was, well, I'll get this agency spun up. That will create some income. That way I can kind of transition out and just run the agency. And I knew how to run agencies because I'd run internal agencies and I'd run external agencies. And so it was a very, like, the business format was familiar. I knew how to bill. I knew how to price things. So it worked. But throughout that whole year, because no one bought anything during COVID, no one was investing in marketing because no one knew what was going on, I couldn't sell anything. But what I could do was have conversations. And so that's what I did. I had dozens of conversations with business owners from all across the country about marketing. And probably hundreds, now I think about it, because I was talking with business owners just about every day, multiple times a day, and just kind of interviewing them. And I didn't really have a structure to it at the time. That would come at like the end of the year. But I just gathered all this like insight into what business owners liked and didn't like about working with marketing agencies. And I think that's what really made me interested in running this new agency with these two guys. And so I went back to them, and their whole thing was like, it was very course focused and then light touch. It was sell this course and then provide support. And I went to them and I said, I will do this, but that's not the model, because I've just spent the last year talking to business owners and no business owner I talked to would buy that. We need to switch it. It needs to be support first, course second. And so they said, well, prove it, do some actual research. And so I wrote out a formula for questions that I would go out and I'd ask all these questions. I collected all the data, I presented, I said, listen, this is what people want. And they said, all right, go do it. So I redesigned their offer and redid all their marketing over the course of the first 3 months. Then we were going to launch this big campaign on Facebook. We got banned on the first day. Incorrectly. We didn't do anything wrong. The account just got banned, and it wasn't going to be turned on for the next 6 months. So we had to switch to pay-per-click and buying leads from Bark. And in the next 3 months, using pay-per-click in the long term, Bark initially, we scaled to over $100,000 in annual revenue in just the first 6 months of the year, and the first 3 months of actually marketing the business, which is pretty amazing. And that, by the time we got there, though, I was completely tapped out. We had this like really cool offer initially where it was like $99 and you just get unlimited sessions with me. And it was this unbelievable offer because like people could just book anytime they wanted. And I thought, oh, that's going to be really challenging because like people are going to want to book multiple times, and how do I control that? And what ended up happening wasn't that at all. It's that people would sign up and then never book. And so I had to change it and instead say, okay, you're going to have a regular session on these days. And so I went through a couple iterations of that, and then our pricing was $99, $199, $399, depending on the number of sessions. And for $99, you got one session a month. And after a couple months, I saw my churn rate on that program was really high, and I realized like once a month coaching just doesn't work. Like you have to do it at least twice. And so I continue to grow until we hit that number. And you're probably doing the math in your head and you're like 99, 198, 39, there's not enough people to add up. And the way we hit the 100K number was because we had upsells. So what I would do is I would bring the clients in for a really low ticket, something that I could easily sell, easily build their confidence, and then show them that I really did care about their business, and then upsell them into additional services. And I hated it. I hate upsells. I hate just asking for more and more money. At least I did at the time. I'm better about it now because I see the additional value. But I had actually kind of got interested in this business initially because I didn't really want to sell agency services anymore, because I had just been told over the course of COVID, like, I'm tired of people trying to sell me stuff. I just need someone to tell me what to do. I can do this stuff my own and just tell me what to do. So I was kind of excited to like not have to do this work, but it became the kind of thing that marketing's complicated. So I would go and say, hey, this is how you do XYZ. And they'd go, that's really hard. I don't know if I can do that. I'd be like, yeah, it is really hard. It took me a while to figure it out, but you'll figure it out. I'd be like, I don't really want to spend the time to figure it out. Can you just do it for me? I go, yeah, but I got to charge you for it. I can't do that for free. And they'd go, oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Just send me an invoice. And I was like, oh, that's really easy. So we go throughout that whole summer upselling until we hit the 100K mark. But I am so busy by the end of that summer that I cannot do anything else. And my business partners come and look at the numbers and they go, we're not happy because this is great. It's great that we got here, but you're capped out. You can't do anything else. What are we going to do? And I said, well, listen, I got a bunch of new clients that have come in. Give me some time to onboard, figure out how to change the pricing. We'll increase the pricing and we'll go from there. So that's what I did. So in September, we increased the pricing. We doubled essentially everything. So it went from $99, $199, $399 to $199 as the base tier, and then $399, and then like $599, I think was the top tier, or like $699. I forget exactly what it was. And so I started going out and selling those, and those sold just as well. So I still brought in clients, but I still had a bunch of clients that were paying the low rate that didn't leave. And I made this promise to them that I would never raise the rates on them. And so I was kind of a prisoner in this business because I couldn't sell more because I didn't have the capacity. And the main element was meeting with me one-on-one. And so we had this key man issue that I had to solve. And the way my business partners met with me at the end of the year and said, listen, we're not thrilled. We thought we would make $1 million in the first year. We're nowhere close to that. And I'm like, guys, I am running this by myself. Like, I have no help in this. One of the things that they had promised me was that all of my marketing needs were going to be taken care of. All my website needs, all my accounting needs, all my everything needs would be taken care of. And they did take care of the accounting, and they did hire a marketing agency. They hired 2 marketing agencies. But the problem is I was still responsible for the lion's share of bringing in new leads. Like, they would pay the guy to run the pay-per-click ads, but I needed to come up with the offer. If the thing wasn't converting, I needed to figure out what was wrong with the website. If the content marketing didn't do anything, like, I still to this day have not brought in one piece of business from the content marketing that we spent $60,000 on that first year. So there's a tremendous amount of money going out every month, and they're not seeing the return. And they're not seeing the return because I am like stressed to the gills trying to get this thing to take off. And so that brings us to the end of that first year where they essentially sit down and say, listen, we need to hit better goals. Like, we need to hit $100,000 in revenue, I think was the goal in the first quarter. And that was like 75% of what we had done that first year. Because as soon as we capped out in September, we couldn't really take on more projects. So they're like, the way we're going to do is we're going to hire a $60,000 salesperson to come in and do sales for you. And it came down, we did this whole interview process. I built this automation. We had this cool instant interview process where people could just like apply and immediately book an interview. I was like, this is so forward thinking. Like, this is such like a good deal and a cool job that I should be able to like pack my calendar full of interviews. And it worked. We did get tons of interviews, tons of great people, but a lot of people that just weren't experienced enough. And the people that were really experienced wanted a lot of money and they weren't really good at sales. So it came down to these 2 people, one of which had a lot of sales experience, the other one that had a lot of strategy experience. I wanted the strategist. They wanted the salesperson. They got the salesperson. He flamed out after about 60 days, primarily because he was stuck in this, like, I think it's like the slave to 2 masters scenario, right? Like, I would tell him something and then my partners would tell him something completely different. And he didn't know who to believe or who to trust or who to follow because he's like, I don't know where my check's coming from. So it's like he just froze and he emailed me and said at the end of February after starting January 1st and said, this isn't going to be a good fit for me. I'm going to take my ball and go home. And I was like, I get it, man. Like, this has not been easy for me. And he didn't close any business and he wasn't really that good of a strategist. He was a nice guy. I liked the guy, but he didn't have the ability to do coaching the way we were doing it, which was very much in person, very much holding people's hands, very much like public facing. He was a behind the scenes guy. And I think that's where he's going to be more successful. And the day after, so I email them, my partners, and I tell them, hey, this is what's going on. And they say, okay, I don't think we really have an appetite for this business. We're clearly not going to hit our number that we had set out the end of last year. So we would like you to buy us out of the business. And like, that was shocking, but immediately exciting to me because I knew that getting them out of the business would really unleash the potential of the business because there were just certain things they did and that they believed about how marketing worked that were antithetical to the way I wanted to run the business and that I knew were holding it back. Things like saddling it with a lot of debt. Like we were paying a lot to all these different vendors and a lot of contracts and service fees. And I just knew we didn't need all of it. And so once they went hands off March 1st, March ended up being our best month of all time because I did everything they told me I shouldn't do and couldn't do and wouldn't let me do. And they didn't care anymore because they were getting bought out of the business. So they were like, yeah, whatever. If you make it more profitable, great. As long as we're getting our money on April 1st, we don't care. And so like, I absolutely crushed it in March and we made tons of money, but we were still in the red. April 1st, I took the business over. April 2nd, I fired everybody. I canceled all of our contracts. I fired the accounting agency. I fired HubSpot. I fired the content firm. Like pretty much anything that was being a drag on the business, like we got fired. And the next month we were ludicrously profitable because without all those things, nothing changed in terms of our deliverables. And all of the revenue we were making was plenty to make the business profitable. And so that immediately turned the business around. Now, at the same time, in March, Kelly's 6 months pregnant. So I have to tell a 6 month pregnant woman with her first child that, hey, I'm going to take this over. I'm going to take it out all this debt to buy them out of the business. And we're going to run this solo. And she was like, you think you can do it? And I was like, I can do it. She's like, go do it. And she never had any doubts or any lack of confidence. And I thought she would. I thought she'd be really nervous about it. And maybe she was, but she never let me see it. And she's like, I know you'll do it. And so that's how we got it. And we had some really great months leading up. And then as we got closer to her due date, which was going to be in July, I started thinking, okay, well, I want to take some time off. This is my first child. I don't know what it's like. I'm going to take like 6 weeks off. How am I going to do this? And I was like, well, I need to hire an assistant to manage the day-to-day. And then I need to figure out like what to do with all these people. And I think people will stay on because I can still meet with them in a group setting and I can still do this and that. And like we had a group program, but it was in conjunction with the one-on-one coaching. And so I wrote up this announcement and I'd preface people weeks before. This wasn't going to be a surprise to anybody. Hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the plan. When this happens, I'm going to take off for 2 weeks and then we're going to do 2 weeks of group sessions or 4 weeks of group sessions. And then I'm going to be back full time. And so it was like 6 weeks that I wanted to like just reduce my load. And then I thought, well, plus hiring this VA, everything will go well. Well, I couldn't find a VA in time. And I ended up, I think the day after my wife had given birth, in my car in the hospital parking lot, interviewing my VA, who I'd eventually hire, and who's now my head of operations, and lady. And she was amazing. And I just knew, I was like, oh, she's such a rock star. She is going to absolutely crush it. She was the head of marketing at Kubota or just a senior marketer at Kubota, something like that. And she just had all this experience. And I knew she was the right person for this job. And so I did that and I was excited. I was like, all right, I'm late, but I'm getting these pieces in place. I send out the email letting everybody know that Molly was born. And the next week, I lost about 80% of my business. People just canceled. They just said, that's great. Glad you're taking some time off. Seems like a good time for us to transition off. And so many of them said like, hey, it's nothing personal. We feel like this is going to make us wait on the sidelines and we don't want to wait on the sidelines. Best of luck. And so I get home from the hospital and I hear back from the recruiting firm I was going through to hire the VA that she had turned me down. And I was like, oh, it's just a gut punch. I've lost all this business and I lost this. And I was like, no, I'm not going to take that no for an answer. So I go and track her down on LinkedIn and I send her a message and I say, listen, can we talk? I heard you didn't accept my offer and I really want to work with you. And it turns out like they never actually presented my offer to her in the amount that I had presented. They were taking a big chunk of it and giving her a pittance. And she rightfully said like, no, I'm not going to work for $1 an hour or whatever the crazy number this recruiting firm offered her, because it just wasn't reasonable for someone of her stature. And so I tell her, I'll pay you whatever you want. Just send me the number. She sent me the number. I was like, done. Can you start on Monday? And then that was 2 years ago. We just celebrated her 2-year anniversary with us. And my next challenge now was, well, I have to dig myself out of this hole. I was really in a bad place when you really think about it. Like, I could not have been in a worse place to hire a new employee because I barely had money to pay myself, let alone her. But I knew that if I was going to increase the clients, I had to do something different. And in order to do something different, I would need someone there to help me manage it. And so I took the risk and I hired her, and I was burning through savings. And I hired a coach that saw a Facebook ad for a coaching program and signed up for it. And it was a disaster. And what it was, the one thing it did give me is it showed me what bad coaching programs look like and what they're doing and how they're letting down their students. And I realized there's things about my program that I do that are really unique that these other programs don't do. And I'm just not highlighting that. I'm not highlighting it in marketing. I'm not highlighting it in my sales calls. And so like that really got me thinking like, all right, there's something there. And then I was really desperate to look for any way to start promoting the business. And I had prepaid back when my partner's still in the business for a TikTok ad agency. And TikTok had just started running ads. It was very early on. And so I said, hey, I don't know anything about how to run TikTok ads. Can you guys come and write me an ad and record it, film it? I don't really want to be on camera. Ironic, I know. And just put it out there, bring me clients. Like you're an ad agency, right? That's what you do. And they were really nice guys. Scroll Media out of Utah. Really nice guys. Like it was not an issue of them not being nice. It was that creatively they were just lacking. I didn't like the ads. The ads didn't resonate. They weren't really good. We ran them just because they wanted, and I put some money behind it. I'd also at that time been running these ads for an ebook because that was the coaching program I was a part of. That was their whole strategy for lead acquisition, was like give away an ebook, which is a terrible idea. Don't do that, by the way. Don't try to give away ebooks as your initial appointment settings. Like give away the ebook if you want to build a mailing list. Don't do it as a appointment setting. It's a terrible strategy. So that fails, and that cost me several $1,000s. And the TikTok campaign fails, and that cost me another like $2,000. So I'm in the hole like $7,000 between what I paid for this course, the money I invested in Facebook advertising, the money I invested in TikTok advertising, and nothing is working. And I am so low. And one of the first things I taught Lady was how to book me on podcasts, because that is one thing that I started to get very good at early on, was getting press. And so I booked a podcast and I got on with this guy and we're chatting, and afterwards he's another marketer, and he's like, hey man, really good talking with you. And I can't even remember how it came out. I think it was just like, I was listening to you talk and I'm just wondering, have you ever heard of Alex Hormozy? And I was like, no, who's Alex Hormozy? He goes, oh, he's this gym guy. He's really famous for like building gyms, but he wrote this book called $100 Million Offers. And I think you'd really dig it. Oh, it was because we were talking about our book collections, because he had a big library too. And I collect books on business and a bunch of stuff. And we were comparing like notes about like what was our favorite books on copywriting and all these different things. And so I very quickly kind of like asked him a bunch of questions about like, well, what do you think is so special about this book? He's like, oh, it's just really cool. It's like, have you ever done any research into like offer development? And I was like, no, what's that? And he goes, oh, well, it's like the process of like packaging your services together in like a unique way. It's like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I've never really done that before. And he's like, yeah, it really helped me like get a better mind around my business. And then around the same time, a client of mine had recommended that I look up Laurel Portier. And so I joined her $7 Facebook ads coaching program because I was like, I gotta get Facebook has got to work better. I joined it and I went through it, and like her strategy was good, but it was really time intensive. And so I was like, this isn't the right thing. This isn't what I need to do right now. But she introduced me to Joel Irway, who had Power Offer. And so I got the Power Offer workshop and I got Alex Hormozi's book, and those two books saved my business. That course and that book saved my business, hands down, full stop, no exceptions, because both of those are about crafting offers and why offers work. And it opened my whole world up to this concept of offers. And I realized that is why I was failing, was because I wasn't putting offers out into the market. I was putting services. And because I was putting services out, I was essentially commoditizing myself against everybody else that had a coaching program and not having anything unique about it and not showcasing that uniqueness and undercharging for it. And it was just a million things that just came to light. And so after I did that, I sat down and I wrote a new ad from scratch. I wrote the whole thing in about an hour. I recorded it using a teleprompter app on my phone in like another hour, and I posted it. And this was like a week before Thanksgiving. And back then, TikTok ads took a while to get approved. So I think I plugged it in like Monday before Thanksgiving and set it up. It's going to go get turned on. And it was going to be a lead generation ad because that's what Scroll Media had set up for me. And I'd set it up so that as soon as they complete the lead, they go into the calendar. So they submit they see the ad, they click the button, they give me the lead. And then that was literally like, it would just send them to a high level calendar and got them signed up. And so I check Tuesday, it's not live. Wednesday, it's not live. Thursday, I check in the morning, it's not live. And then I turn my phone off because Thanksgiving, right? Like I'm not going to sit on my phone all day, but I just try not to think about it because like things are really bad. And I just kind of want a little bit of escapism of watching the parade and the dog show and not worrying about it. So I put the phone down, and then we do the whole Thanksgiving, and it's like 8:00 at night, and I turn my phone back on, and like I have dozens of notifications, and I go and look, and Monday had been completely booked on my calendar. I had like 8 bookings come in, and I had like 3 more on Tuesday. And then the next day I got like 6 more bookings. And the next day I got 5 more bookings, and then 6 more bookings, and then 10 more bookings. And it got to the point where I had 2 weeks of sales straight, and I was booking so far out into the future. People were booking 6 weeks out with me. And then that comes into a whole nother thing I'll talk about in another video about. Don't do that. Limit it to 10 days. That's the best practice. But I was like, holy crap, I'm onto something. Like something's actually working. And so that was the first time ads ever worked for my own business. I'd gotten ads to work in other people's business. I'd never gotten them to really work like consistently in my business, and this worked. And so I took it. I took the ad and let it run and gave it more money. And at the end of the next week, Scroll Media called me and they said, bro, what is going on? And I was like, I don't know, man. The ad like hit. And he's like, dude, everybody else, like their ads have just like completely tanked over the last week. You're the only one of our clients who's actually doing well. Like, this is insane. Everybody's talking about your ad because no one can believe how many calls you're booking. And I was just like, I know, man. And that really was like a turning point for the business, because after that, I was able to completely, like, we scaled very quickly from barely making like $5,000 or $6,000 a month to making 15, 20, 25. And then as we did that, we continued to evolve the business, and we moved further away from one-on-one coaching and more into agency services. And then we took the coaching program and really made it to be more of a group-led program, and started taking on bigger and bigger clients, and started developing this new firm that I'm working on now that just deals with larger enterprises. And we just signed a huge client that I had been chasing forever. And like, they finally signed. And so it's like, we still have ups and downs. We're not on easy street yet, but looking back on all the challenges we've had getting up to this point, it certainly feels like, even though the challenges we face now are bigger, thinking about what we've already been through and how low we've been and how painful some of those losses were, and the struggles of not being able to grow and being limited and just feeling like you're stuck on the launch pad, have really subsided. So after that year, we closed out the year strong. We started the next year strong. We've made a bunch of mistakes in the business. I've tried to hire salespeople that didn't work out. I've tinkered with pricing. I've sold packages that were priced incorrectly, and we've lost money on them. But through all of those, every time we fail, we get a clear vision of what we need to do moving forward. And that's why today I'm more confident than ever that we're on the right track with a lot of this stuff. And there's a lot of people that will tell you how you should run your business and what's important to run your business. But the thing that I have found is most important to me is not the money. The money's good. The money provides safety and security and consistency. What I really aim for is being able to spend more time with my family. And so when people on TikTok or YouTube talk about the rise and grind, and you just have to make as much money as quickly as possible, and you have to do real estate deals, and you have to do this, and you have to work, and you can't spend, you should lock yourself away. I just don't believe that. I don't believe that's any way to live. I don't believe that in the short time we have on earth that you should work yourself to death in the hopes that someday you'll be free, because I think freedom is a fallacy. There is no such thing as true freedom, right? Like, there's not. You pay property taxes. Even if you give up everything and you live like a humble farmer, the government will take your land if you don't pay taxes. So there's no freedom. There's just not. Maybe after the collapse of society, we'll know true freedom. But thinking that you're going to work yourself to death and one day achieve this elusive freedom, it's just not going to happen. It just becomes, the challenges become more challenging and the rewards become greater. And I'm happy where we're at. It's one of those things that, like, you live the life you've earned. I definitely want more in life. I'm not satisfied 100%. But I got to tell you, like, I get today, for example, I'm going to be done around 4:30, and I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to spend the evening with my daughter. And I'm not going to look at work, and I'm not going to sit at my desk, and I think we're going to watch Cookie Monster. And I never got to do that with my dad, because my dad did a full-time job and then did his side hustle of trying to build this business after work. And that's not to say my dad did anything wrong. It's just to say, when we think about why we're doing this and the life we're trying to provide, sometimes the things that you want to provide for other people are not things that money can buy. Money can't buy me more time with my daughter. No amount of money can do that. So I'd rather give her as much of that as possible while I'm here. And then with the time I have left over, figure out how to provide even greater for my family. So that's a little bit of that's the story. I left out some bits. I'll probably come back. I didn't talk about my notary business. That was a pretty cool business I did during COVID because of the refi boom. I scaled that to profitability in 30 days. That wasn't a good story, but that didn't really make it in. And there's plenty that's happened in the last year or two that I didn't cover, because the reality is you get kind of into the graininess there, and it's not as clear a storyline as it is in those early days, where these huge highs and huge lows. Now it's not as high and low. It's a little bit more moderate. And every year we're in business, those highs and lows become a little less, and it becomes more kind of stable, hopefully. You're never going to eliminate variability, but hopefully that's the goal. So anyway, I've been talking for an hour and 8 minutes plus the 20 minutes I had before. So I am praying that this saves. But if you're still listening to me, thank you. I appreciate you spending the time. Molly, I hope you appreciate this. If you listen and get to listen to this one day, I certainly hope you do. I'm going to keep doing episodes.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. Make sure to like and follow my page to see more of my videos and subscribe to my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube to check out the full episodes. You can find all those links in the description.